Oh, oh, yo. Oh. That's it, yeah. Oh, oh, yo. Oh. That's it, yeah. Right, try. Right, try. Uh, alright. Can you? Okay, yeah, the mic one. Uh, can you? Okay, yeah, the mic one. What? Oh, I think. Wait, what I'm saying here, I have something open. It echoes. Because I have the stream open. I have to close that. What's stream? Cool. Yeah, 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 I got it on YouTube. It's just more. It's easier to record because like when you stream that, YouTube will automatically record it for you. Mm-hmm. Hi. Yes. Where's the fan at? We're putting it up now. Yeah. Good. All right. So I'll start around 5:10. We'll give 10 minutes for anyone to come. Okay. Good. I have no idea, man. I think Suji is coming way late. That's all right. All right, so just in the meantime, I've got this QR code up and it leads to like the Notion page. It's the same Notion page that I linked. Wait, I can turn on my mic for this. Uh, this linked to the Notion page and it's the same Notion page you can access that I sent on Discord. And in the Notion page, I'll pull it up here. Hold on. It should bring you to this Notion page. This is a link of the presentation I'm about to show. I got this app called Bosca Seoul, and yeah, you could go ahead and start downloading that now. Just while waiting. If you don't think you have that good of a download speed, there's a web version as well, so you can just mess around with it like that. But yeah, okay, wait, I need to actually. What is my? Hmm? The store, yeah, I can put it back. Alright, so let's start it in 5 minutes. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's in the Discord now. So you can, oh, if it asks you to pay, just click no thanks, just take me to the downloads. Right? Oh, that's a good info. Right? Great. All right, so I think I'm good to start now. I've got around 10 minutes for everyone to come in. So yeah, hi everyone. My name is Thaha, and welcome to the Music Composition in Games workshop. Nice to have you all here. Yeah, so yeah, in case you didn't catch it, you can just scan this link, or uh, the same link is on the Discord, in the Discord announcement, and it leads to our Notion page with just everything that I'll be covering during the workshop. And there will also be like a download link for something called Boscasio, and I'll talk about what that is in a bit. So, can I just get a round of hands? How much of How many of you are people who want to be like an indie generalist, knowing about every single aspect of making games? All right, oh, that's nice. And how many of you are like locked in on composition specifically, just like making music? Oh, there's a big overlap. All right, nice. How many of you have like dabbled into music production before? So okay. Oh, so we got about like half the room. Nice. So I'll be covering a bit of like an introduction to making music. If you don't have that knowledge, but but the other half of the presentation has a bit more like theoretical elements and stuff to think about that should be useful to anyone regardless of their experience. So let me start off by introducing what I would say are the 3 levels of music composition in games. And I would break it down into like the first part we're gonna touch on. Level 1 is just making music digitally. And that means, that just means making any sort of music in your PC and whatnot. And just getting started off with that. After that is making music for games. And so this is like when you put the beeps and the boops and like you make the sounds kind of vibe. And this is, specifically into games compared to making music, compared to like, making pop music or any other kind of like standard form of music. And then the last one is making music interactive. Because what you get in games compared to like film and whatnot is that it's an interactive medium. And so how does that affect the way that you compose music? So let's start off with section 1, making music digitally. This is why in the Notion I've got Boscasio. I don't know if that's the actual way you're supposed to say it. It's a weird name. But Boscasio is like a very simple music making tool. And you can't do everything in it, but it's good at like bringing out ideas really quickly and like jotting down some stuff. And a lot of people really recommend doing it for game jams because in game jams you don't have a lot of time to like do a lot of finesse and you just got to do things really quickly. So yeah, does everyone have Boscasio downloaded or have the web version up? All right, nice. So I'm gonna move on to just starting to make your first song digitally. And there are about 4 elements that I'll introduce in terms of making songs. And the first one is chords. So just very simply, here's a little chord thing that I have. Okay, well, I was gonna play a video, but I think the video, yeah, okay. So I can't play that. I can pull up the file though. Give me a second for that. So, shoot, why do I have game presentation? Probably this one. Okay, wait. I'm gonna bring it over here. And let me just focus on this one specifically. So when you're in Boscasio, you'll see a bunch of stuff. Okay. It might seem a little complicated and whatnot. So I can just, okay, wait, let me make a new thing here. Song, yeah. And it will bring you to this page, just having a bunch of tooltips, giving a guide on how to use the program. And it's a very simple program. There's a bunch of like random stuff and whatnot. I'll guide you along through the way. But pretty much what you can do is you can just you can click to put down notes and it'll start to like play a bit of a tune, So you can mess around with it. If you, okay, how do I, okay. If you use your, if you scroll, you can make it a bit longer and put in a bit of a longer note. And you can right click to delete notes as well. So you'll get something a bit like this. And whatnot. So that's how you start off using the program. Say I want to do this. Then up here, there's a tab called Arrangement. And you can see like we've got this little thing here. This is the current track that we've got that we started on. And we can kind of like drag it over to duplicate it. So which feels a bit weird, but you get used to it eventually. And so you can see it like you can see it play through the different patterns. And over here, you can actually click Add New to create a new pattern. And you know, maybe I'll go with this with a different kind of melody. And I can right click to remove that and drag this over so that if I play it, you have to drag along down here as well to select which patterns to play. And it'll loop across those patterns. So you can see it go through like the different patterns you've made. All right. And I'll continue going through Boscasiol as I mention each example of like making music. I want to start off though by so as I go along, I'm gonna explain a bit of like making a track. And so I think, oh shoot, that was not what I meant to do. Hold on. So no, you can take a seat and whatnot. So if I, yeah. Oh, this is gonna be annoying. Okay, so if I go here, if I go put this here, you can see I've got a little bit of a pattern I've got going on. And this time I have like 3 notes stacked on top of each other, and it goes through a few things. And these are chords, right? And so I'm gonna go through just making our first set of chords. So chords are a good way to establish like the tone and the feel of your music. And to make it in Boscasiol, what I would recommend you start doing is down here, there's an area where it says scale normal. This means like you have like every note in like the 12 note music thing to mess around with. But just to make it simpler, for when you're starting out in music, I'd recommend you to click scale major. And then here you can click whatever note you like. And I'll stick with C, which is the default one. And to make a chord, you can just you can start with your first note. So I'll put it on this C here and go up 2 notes to put in my next one, and go up another 2 notes to put in my next one. And so this makes like a very simple chord. And we want to like sandwich that. I want a nice way to look at it would. Oh, sorry. So if you want to make a note, why is it so cheap? If you want to make a note longer, you can use your scroll wheel to make it longer or shorter. Does that work? All right. Yeah, and a nice way to think about chords is like you put in your first note, and then you put it. So this would, and you could say this is like the one, and you put in a 3 and a 5. 1, 3, 5. You get 3 notes together with like a bit of spacing, and that creates chord, which is like a few notes that sound nice together. And you can put multiple of these together. So I'm gonna start. So I've started off there. I can go up a little bit, and then go. Maybe make this a little silly goofy. I'll make this one 6 long, and I'll make this 3 long. And by putting a few of these chords together, you get sort of a chord progression. And I can play it and see if it sounds nice or not. Let's see. Okay. But I can change the BPM here to make it a little slower. And whatnot. So let me play that. But yeah, by putting 3 notes together and then sequencing a few of them next to each other, you get a chord progression, and it gives you like a sort of mood or feeling for your track, to which later on you can add in other elements. So you can start off with that. And I'll give you like a few minutes to try and make a chord progression on your own, mess around in Boss Casio. You know, you know. I kind of brushed over it a bit earlier, but here I set it to, you can adjust, so it should start with scale normal, but I went to scale major, and by selecting that, it makes things a bit easier, and it selects notes that sound nice together. So then you can do the 1, 3, 5, 4 to make it easy to start off. All right. Oh, sorry. you have to kind of, it's a bit not, but you have to like drag it into this one thing. So it's a very simple software, but it allows you to like get stuff done quick. So yeah, I mean that's if I could get your attention very shortly, that's kind of like the idea behind chords. Um, just to make it really quick, to make it really easy, set the scale to major, and then you start out by putting your first note. That's what we would call the root note, and then we add a note, two notes above, another note, two notes above that, so four notes above the root note, and it's kind of like 1 3 5 pattern, and this will create like a simple chord. Now, and when you sequence the different chords together, it creates a chord progression which helps like create a feel for the song. So moving on, we can touch upon bass. And I'm gonna run through like a very simple way of making a bass line. And that is pretty much just copying your chord progression. So I can click add new. What I can do here, because it's going to be the same sound, right? It's still going to be the grand piano. I can click on instrument. Click, is my thing? Oh yeah. Click on add new instrument. And there's a bunch of random preloaded instruments here. And so I can click, oh, I want a bass and see what kind of bass I vibe. I know it's analog bass. I can see if that. Okay, down here also you have to change it from grand piano to bass down at the bottom left. So click on bass and see how that sounds. You can adjust volume up here near the instrument area. So I'm gonna go down and put it here. Bass should be a few octaves lower. So just here. So that's a bit, maybe here. Yeah, I think that's all right. So I'll do the same thing, set the scale to major, but instead I'm not going to build chords with this. I'm going to look at this pattern and I'm just going to copy the root note for each chord. So the first one for each chord is, it starts here, C, then E, then F, then D. So I'll just copy that for my bass, copy it to the same amount of time. So I'll go here, C, and then the next I made it, I think 6. Was it E? I think C, E, F, D. Just copy like the first note there. C, D, F, C, E, F, D. And so this is pretty much me copying the first note for the chords. And it would sound something like this. Now, if I put them together, it would sound like this. This might be a bit high actually. There's these buttons over here, plus and minus, and you can use that to move all the notes down a bit. So move all the way down here. Let me go back. Yeah. All right, so I'll give you a bit of time to make your bass line and then we'll move on. All right. So in summary, wait, let me just in summary, making the baseline very simple. The only thing I wrote was copy the root note of your chord progression. That's it. Uh, you can play around with it a bit more. So something that may be quite nice would be to take this and maybe instead of making it exactly the same, you change the length. So instead of playing it 4 beats long, you can play two beat long notes for the bass. Same thing here, and whatnot. Or you can even, like, instead of just having it long here, you can make it lead into the next note. Well, you can't really hear it, but you can mess around with that to an extent. So moving forward, let's touch on the melody, right? So we've got a chord and a bass line that kind of gives us the feel of the track. It gives us like the emotion, and we can start playing around with creating a melody to put on top of those chords. If I open up Bosca CO, I'm gonna make a new instrument for this. So I'll add new instrument. Let's see how that sounds. I'll create a new pattern and I'll drag it over here. I'll click this so that it plays that pattern and see how this instrument sounds. Sure, I'm not. So, something to help make melodies a bit easier is to switch it from normal. Before we switch it to major, to make the chords easier, to make the bass match the chords. But this time for the melody, to make it even easier, we're gonna play on pentatonic major. There's a big difference, like pentatonic minor and then major. Make sure you click on major, because the chords are in major as well. So pentatonic major, what it does is it selects the notes that all sound good together. You would see people use a pentatonic major, say if someone's doing like a guitar solo, by only picking the notes that are in the pentatonic major, they'll all sound good together. And so here, I can just do random stuff and it'll sound pretty good. Now, I mean, you can't just go crazy and expect it to sound perfect. So a few things to think about is, having a few patterns, maybe notice when it goes up, and then like a few parts where it goes down. And notice like the trajectory. So like here, there's like a staircase, the notes where the notes are leading up. Here, the notes are leading down. Another thing you might want to take advantage of is, repeating similar patterns. So here we have, I can copy the same 3 notes here, over here. And having that bit of repetition makes your melody more catchy and makes it more recognizable. And then, something simple like this, where there's a lot of repetition. This is almost the same thing. And this half is almost the same as the first half, except for this accent here. And you can see the notes go up, go down, go up, go down. And that can help make like your melody sound a bit more structured. So if I press play now, you can see, you can kind of get a feel for the melody. And once I put the bass and the chords together, and very simply like that, you can kind of see the tune start to get together. So I'll give you some time to do that. It might be better for me actually to just pull up this page of like things to keep in mind. So pentatonic major scale helps a lot. Noticing the flow of notes rising, falling, or just alternating between two notes, taking advantage of loops and repetition. So yeah, I'll give you some time to mess around. Making a presentation. Yeah, right. The scale and the beta, the scale would flow or yeah, this is not what cheap demo my this is my so the do you want to oh that's All right, so I'll move on to the last thing. Um, this one's gonna be quite, yeah. So I'll move on to the last thing now. We've got chords, we've got bass, we've got melody, and now I'm going to introduce drums. And so drums are a bit fun. You don't have to use them in every context. There's a lot of really good game music that doesn't have drums. If you're in a town or whatnot. But it's a really important tool to getting the rhythm, to getting the beat, to being like the heartbeat of your track. If you're making, say, like a boss music theme or whatnot. And there's 3 parts to drums. So you can go to instrument, add new instrument, and there's one all the way down here called drum kit. I'll pick that. I'll go back to the arrangement view and click add new for a new pattern. And I'll start looping through this, right? And so for drums, there's 3 elements to it. You start off with your beat, right? Which is kind of like the pulse of the thing, which is usually one of these bass drums. So you can have that. And then you want something which contrasts the beat, which is usually the snare. And you can do it at alternate times. So this is like at the first, if we divide it into 4 sections, the bass drums on the first note of every section, and then we can move on to the snare, put that on the 2. And this is like a very cliche, very standard kind of drum beat that you would expect. And then you can put, lastly, some kind of constant to just stagnate or like to keep the energy throughout the entire drum beat. So if I can just put closed hi-hats here. And it's very simple, very very simple, very classic drum beat. May not be the best, probably not the best in every circumstance, so be wary of it. So you want to adjust the drum beat to your music. But if I put this with what I have now, yeah, I mean, in my opinion, the drum beat feels kind of weird with the track. But depending on what situation you're making your music for in your game, it may be really essential to have the drum beat. So it's really important to keep that in mind. I'll try and whip something here. But yeah, you can go ahead. If you're still tinkering around with your melody, you can spend some more time on that. If you want to hop over to try making a drum beat, you can do that. So yeah, go ahead and mess around. Mm. But yeah, give it a shot. on the board. As you do that, I'll give you like a minute or so, and then we'll move on. All right. Fine. All right. Is everyone done with your tracks on Boscasio? You good? Does anyone want a bit more time before I move on? Because things are about to get a lot less interactive. All right. So, yeah, those are like the four main elements to starting to make your own music on yeah, to start making your music, start making a few tracks, start making a few songs. And some of the stuff I mentioned about choosing major, I mean, you can choose major or minor. They both act the same way for the chords. It's really good and easy way to, start getting some ideas out, start getting some chord progressions down. When you're starting off, I would recommend, I felt to this fit track, but I would recommend you not think, oh, I'm so much better than music theory. I can figure it out on my own. It's a very solid foundation, very good way, and especially if you're making music for a game jam where you have a limited amount of time, I would highly recommend using like the major to make a few simple chord progressions, and then with the melody, just clicking on the pentatonic major. If you're doing it in a minor scale, I would choose pentatonic minor, and like I mentioned before, that just picks the notes that sound nice together, so it's very quick and very easy to start making a few nice melodies. So I'm gonna start talking about the whole song instead of just one loop. And one thing is, as you see with like the way Bosca Seal works, there's a ton of different patterns here, right? And the way you do stuff is by putting different patterns in I mean, everything loops to an extent, and you slowly, like here, instead of following the same melody, maybe you would change it up for something else and whatnot. But you get a lot of these similar patterns, and then slowly change one of them and alternate a few to make a song. And I would like to talk about that. Some of the things to keep in mind when you start to sequence patterns together. So here I have like two melodies which I made beforehand, and they look a bit different. Right. So these are two distinct melodies. This is version A, version B, right? And when I structure it, when I put them together in Boscasio, I could put it in a way in a section like this, right? So for 2 bars, I put in melody A, 2 bars, I put in melody B. And when I put it in context with everything else, it would be, A for melody, B for melody, and everything else will stay the same. But by having a few different patterns for each aspect, for chords, bass, melody, drums, you can lay throughout the entire track. You can start to interweave different parts of different things together to create a lot of change. That sounds a bit complicated, and this isn't gonna help. But let's say like each of these things has A and a B version. You can see the melody shifting every two bars, right? A, A, B, B, A, A, B, B, A, A, B, B. And the drums will shift every four bars. So this goes with A, 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 B, 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 A, 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 B, 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 B. And the chords and the bass take longer, so they'll shift every 8 bars. So for the first A, they're both A, the next A, they're all B. But creating these simple, just creating two versions of each part of the song allows you to like make it so much longer, so much more interesting by just picking different parts and different times, picking different sections in different parts of the song, picking different versions at different parts of the song. When you do create the different sections, there are a few things that you should keep in mind, and these are things called motifs, right? What a motif is a recognizable pattern throughout all the different melodies throughout the track. And you can see here, I have 3 different versions of melodies, and each of them have this repeating pattern of, it doesn't have to be a very strict structure or whatnot. The pattern here is just 2 notes together, right? It's playing the D note twice. It's common across all patterns. And there's a few other simple ones here, like having it go from C to A, there, and having that repeat around. And having this pattern combined with this pattern to create another pattern here, where it's 2 notes on B, 1 on C, 1 on A. And having this repeat across all 3 melodies. It just comes here, it just here, and here. And here it looks a bit weird because there's a gap in between. But you can stretch the motif in a bunch of different ways. You can put a few holes in it, you can make it a bit longer. But as long as it stays as those notes, people will recognize it. And the thing is, like, when people are going through a game and whatnot, you want them to be able to like recognize, to have like if you want to have a catchy melody, you need a lot of these motifs for people to recognize it. If you make a song where there's no recognizable pattern, no recognizable melody, everything changes all the time, it'll feel a bit unstructured. It'll feel a bit, people won't appreciate it as much as you're playing the game. So, I do. Here's a few bullet points from what I said. You can create several patterns for each part of the song, mix, match, and cycle them around to keep it interesting, and make sure within like the different patterns there are motifs that repeat across all of them. And last thing to keep in mind is that you should sequence the tracks such that the same energy is kept from start to finish. And what that means is, because you're making music for a game, you don't want to create a track that's slow at first, and then there's like rising action, and then there's the climax, and then there's a bit of falling action, because it's going to loop through the game. I'll delve into it a bit more. But it could feel weird if you're like building your house in Minecraft, and then the music goes on a huge story arc, and then once it's done, you just start the story over again. It can start to get a bit messy. And so I'm going to show you an example of one of the tracks I made. Here I'm gonna save it first, and I'm gonna load in on my previous project. And this is the one where like there were a few photos. I was gonna have a video of it pop up for each individual section during the presentation, but for some reason my video files kind of got messed up. But here you can see the basic chord progression, and this is the basic bass line. This is the melody, And you can see those repeating areas. This is the first drum, and then I have a few more. I have a different chord progression, I have a different bass line, I have a different melody, I have a different drum. But a lot of them, what the heck is this? I don't know what this is. But a lot of them have those like reoccurring motifs. And so when I play it all together, you can, if I play it all together, you'll be able to notice, like, you'll feel the difference, but you'll notice a few recurring patterns. So here we go. And then the melody changes. Here it goes back to the previous melody but changes drums. And then this goes to the same melody and drums as before, but the chord progression changes. The bass line's also a bit different. And this goes back to the previous melody. Okay, I don't know why it goes all the way out here, but... And then this goes back to the previous melody, previous bass, previous chords. And then here, new melody is introduced with the drums and chords as before. And it would loop to the start, but for some I don't know why my boss car's acting up. But yeah, it would go back to that. So yeah, that's the vibe with, having that, like, having those reoccurring patterns, having those motifs and whatnot. Something that a lot of games have is something called a lead motif, where the motif doesn't just stay in one track, but you can see it all across like multiple tracks in the game, and whatnot. And it allows you to connect things together. Some games make it quite interesting, where a particular motif will play for like certain characters and whatnot. And yeah, you can do a lot of fun stuff with that. But yeah, that is the end of section 1, creating music digitally. So let's take a bit of a break. I've just got some Celeste music here. So we'll take like a 2-3 minute break and whatnot, just to chill and relax before I move on. All right. Okay, I'm gonna resume. I think that was enough for the break, and we're gonna delve into the second section, which is making music for games. All right. And so this is a bit more theoretical stuff. It's a bit more conceptual. And you're not, and we're not gonna need Boscasio open anymore to try and make some beats. So let's give this a so. To start off, when you want to make music for like a proper game, Boscasio is really good for a game jam. But to make an official game, what you would use is a digital audio workstation. And I'm not gonna. They're very complicated because you saw how Boscasio had like a few limitations and whatnot. Digital audio workstations aim to allow you to really like adjust every single aspect of the song. And here are a few common digital audio workstations. We've got Logic Pro, which is on Mac. We've got Ableton, and we've got FL Studio. And in it will look something like this, which might look a little crazy. There's a bunch of stuff going on, there's a lot to learn. But it does allow you to really tweak every single aspect of the music. So. On the Notion page, I have a few DAWs listed of like a few paid ones, which a lot of people use, and a few free ones as well. So it's worth checking that out if you're interested. But I want to delve into what I touched upon here, which is the difference between game audio and having a master track, right? So a master track would be something, it's just like a full-on song. Like just now we were listening to one of the tracks in this last OST, and you saw like the tension slowly rise up. There was like introduction section, like middle section and whatnot. And you'd have something like this, it's a full song from start to finish. Like I can play a little thing I have here. If I could. Let me. Oh, this is so soft. Oh. Okay. So you could hear how there's like an introduction period, and then a part where there's a bit more action going on, things are going a bit faster, and then there's like a falling action at the end, right? And while this track can look into your game, it does kind of have that game music sound. It will be kind of tricky in your game because as the track progresses, it has this story structure where there's an introduction, climax, and end, right? But if you're like just reading text and then suddenly you go through that story structure in the music all the time, there's a bit of a dissonance there. And so what people would usually do for game music is they would have separate tracks, maybe like part 1, part 2, part 3, and each of them would have the individual sounds. So let me make like a little game example that you can follow along with, right? Let's say we've got this guy, and it's like a little current of milk, right? And we can start with, it's the introduction, he's saying some stuff, there's a bit of chat going on, and we can see this loop around. That. And then, oh my god, what? He's shouting, there's something going on. That's when it switches to the more upbeat, the more high tempo kind of track. And now he's like running around. Oh, maybe there's something going wrong. And maybe the character, maybe in the game, the guy's running around, but he's really bad later. He can't see the exit and he travels like in other directions before finally getting there. So you have this high intensity music play for as long as you're running. And then once it calms down, you play the falling action, right? Like, he's gonna save the day, And he's going like, I am Steve. Or something, But that's the thing, you need to separate it into these individual elements because a game is sort of like a ball. If you remember previous workshop, I mentioned this before. But a game is like a box you give the player, and it has a ton of buttons, levers, and interactable components. You can't control what the player does. You can't control how fast he solves the puzzle. You can't control in what order he clicks the buttons. And so you need to create music that is contained in loops, where each individual section is contained in loops, so that you can react appropriately to whatever the player is doing at that current point in time. So, moving forward, there are a few considerations I would put in when composing game music, other than just putting things into loops. And there are three that I found. The first one is paying attention to context. This is very simple. This is the same thing you'd pay attention to in like film or whatnot. What's the story beat going on? How fast is the current scene? What's the pacing? But the next thing is style. And that's stuff like, Persona 5, where things are extremely stylized. And then there's environment, And that's that kind of stuff where you can associate some music with like an ice level or a sand level in a game. Let's delve into that. Context is very simple. I'll just gloss over it. You have pacing. Your tempo should be at the same tempo as the energy in your scene. If you're having a fight scene, you don't want to make things go like very slow. You don't want like a very slow track. And if you're chilling at a town, you don't want something crazy. Story is similar, where if you're happy, this music should be happy. If the game's sad, someone died, the music should be sad. So it's very self-explanatory, and it's the same with like music in general, right? Something more specific to games is something like style. The style of there's so many different types of games, right? And what music you would see in something like Pokemon Emerald is different from what you would see in Pokemon Arceus. And that's different from what you would see in Breath of the Wild, which is different from Wind Waker. I think it's Majora's Mask, which is different from A Link to the Past. These games are in the same franchise, but the kind of music you compose for them are different. And that's because there's a few things you need to consider when looking at style. One big one is scope, right? Scope as in like scope of what the player can do. Is your game a linear narrative where you're just reading text as a visual novel? Or is it like an open world game like Breath of the Wild, like GTA, where you can go into different areas? Another important thing is whether or not the game is minimalist or high definition. And so, a pixel art game would play like a lot of chiptune tracks, like what we just made, right? But it wouldn't make sense to see that in something like Elden Ring, right? It'd be kind of whack to have like the notes go do as you're fighting a boss in Elden Ring, and whatnot. Even like, so 2D and 3D has big separation, but even within that 2D, the difference between the music you get in like old Pokemon is different from Hollow Knight, which has a lot more high definition vector art. With 3D, you have like a lot more style, like more retro music in something like a Short Hike, which uses a lot more like which uses a lot lower definition models than something like Elden Ring I mentioned before, which generally has more orchestral music as you get like more high detail, and also a lot more ambiance, where you just focus on like the sound of the birds chirping or the leaves rustling. And the last thing is stylistic flair, because sometimes games do like crazy stuff, like they try to visually represent themselves in a very exaggerated manner, and you want music that joins with that and maybe goes to a genre that's less often explored in games. A really good example of this is Persona 5, where Persona has Persona has a incredibly stylized stylized UI, incredibly stylized art, and they make it all sync with the game's idea of becoming a rebel, you know? And they also chose to compose the music using a lot of jazz, because jazz is synonymous with a lot of like jazz improvisation. There's a lot of dissonances in the chord progressions that they do and whatnot, which synergize with the message the game is trying to convey. So I have this here, a side-by-side of an old Pokemon game. I forgot which. I think this is Diamond and Pearl. So I've got Pokemon Platinum here, back in the Game Boy Advance, versus Pokemon Legends Arceus, which is kind of in the same generation, but you can see throughout the years and like how the art style has changed, and you can see how the music has changed as well. So if I press play. There's a bit more like chip tune going on, and the melody's a bit, I don't know, you can just feel it, right? You can feel like the 2D pixel art kind of game. And this is the track that you get, talking to these guys in Pokemon Arceus. There's a lot more emphasis on like, footsteps rustling. It's a lot more orchestral. It's a lot more like reverb. It makes you feel like you're in like a big open space, to really match that style, match like a more realistic, more 3D style. If we were to say flip it, god damn it. If we were to say flip it and play modern Pokemon music with old Pokemon art, it starts to sound a bit, you start to feel a bit of dissonance. Oh god damn it, it's me. So you've got that like open orchestral music with like very simple graphics, and it makes things feel a bit more empty, a bit more hollow. Whereas if you have the chiptune music with the open 3D art, it's a bit more noisy, It feels a bit off. And it doesn't really immerse you into the scene as much. And yeah, so that's why it's really important to take into consideration the scope of your game and what medium it is. In terms of aesthetic, it's also really cool to match your music to however your game is stylized. And you get a wide array of stuff here where, you have like the more hip hop sample heavy soundtrack of Jet Set Radio. To match with the feel of the game, you can get something like World of Goo, which plays opera on a bit more of like a existentialist kind of game. You can get something like Cuphead, which tries to play into that like old 80s aesthetic. And you can get something, mentioning it again, but Persona, with that more jazzy kind of feel. And so paying attention to the kind of style that you want the game to be in, direction, keeping that in mind when selecting the genre of your song is very important. So lastly, we've got the environment of your game. I have a little bit of a fun little activity to do this one. I'm going to play a random song, and I want you to guess whether that song comes from the ice level in the game, the snow level in the game, or whatever else, alright? Ice and snow is the same thing, sorry. That's a bad example. So let's give this a listen. Does anyone have any ideas? You have anything? Yes, this is the ice level track for Pokemon XY. Now, for the next one, we've got this. Do you have any ideas what kind of level this may be? Yeah, this is the desert level for a game called Crosscode. Have any of you heard of that game? But you can see you don't know the game yet, so you don't know what music it has for what level. But based on the instrumentation or something they do with the melody, you can kind of tell what that level is. The next one is this. Any ideas from this table? Yeah, this is jungle level music from Donkey Kong Country. And lastly, we have this, which might be a bit harder. that's a game. No. Yes, this is for the water level in Pikmin. And so yeah, like I mean, we got 3 out of 4 of them, right? But what kind of stuff do you think of when creating music for specific environments? And I've broken it down into 2 things, which I think are very helpful. 2 things to help guide you into the right direction. So the first one is cultures related to that environment. That's and okay, I have freaking all the bullet points on here. But yeah, so thinking of a culture related to that environment can be a good way to start off. So when you want to make snow level music, thinking of like a Christmas tune, or thinking of music from people who live in the Arctic, maybe you want some kind of like Nordic folk music, although that has some connotations of like Vikings and whatnot. So you should be aware of that. You have stuff like, with the desert level, a lot of the instruments were like Arabic instruments. It's not like Arabic music, right? Arabic or Sub-Saharan Africa. And for water levels, it's a bit more interesting because no one lives in the water. There's no Atlantis, but you can take places like around the water to guide yourself into some kind of music. So some levels, like Visual Galaxy and Super Mario Galaxy, they use Caribbean music as an inspiration. Some other places will use like surf rock in Hawaii, and sometimes people use stuff like sea shanties as well. Pirates singing in the ocean as a guide to creating water level music. Another one you can think of is a bit more complicated, but it's from like conveying specific feelings tied to the environment into the way you compose the track. It's a bit more complicated, but yeah, it's a bit messy to manipulate everything in one big block. But when you think of ice with a icy snowy level, when you think of ice, it may not bring any music to you, but if you think of like what's it like being in the ice? Is it like cold and shivering? Is it isolating? You can think of like more specific connotations like that and putting it into your tracks. Something like water. Are you thinking of like having fun at the beach? Are you thinking of like swimming in water things that are a bit bubbly? Are you thinking of the vast deep oceans that's lonely, something and like Subnautica? Are you thinking of all the lives, the fish going around, and how like there's a bunch of stuff going on? There's a ton of different ways to reinterpret, to look at this environment, think of the connotations of it, and build that into your track. So I made I tried to make a bit of an example track, an example of a water level track. So I have it here. Don't mind just Thomas the Tank Engine. I don't know how well I did, but this is a bit of a water level theme that I've got. And okay, I don't know about melody, but the chords and all that are a bit stretched out. There's a bit more reverb to create that kind of echo. That I mean, there would be echo, literally, but a kind of figurative echo representing the vastness of the depths of the ocean. I'm gonna pull up some of the stuff I did this in Bosca Seoul as well, to explain it to you. So let me load. I have it somewhere. Water level test music, yeah. So I have this here, and some of the stuff that I explored. Earlier I mentioned the majors in 135. But in this case, I changed it to 159. Made it a bit bigger, made a bit more space in between it, and open areas of the dark. I changed it. If you don't know much of this area, it might make sense to you, but I changed it to I don't know if it's I changed it to 3/4, make things a bit less grounded, because the thing with a 4/4 tempo, that's when you count like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's very grounded. It's very common, everyone recognizes it. But when you do something like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, it's a bit floatier, you know? I don't know if I did anything else. I added a bit of dissonance. That's why you can feel like the creepy Thomas the Tank Engine image here. But yeah, so really taking that idea of, like what ideas of the ocean do I want to focus on? How creepy it is. And bringing those ideas into how I compose the track. Okay. And yeah, that is it for the second section. I'll put in a bit of a break here as well before we move on to the last section, which I'll cover very briefly. So I'll just put a bit of video game music. Does everything make sense? Does anyone have any questions? Is there anything you're confused about? All right, is everyone feeling good to move on? All right. So, for the last section of this workshop, making music interactive. If this will move to the next slide. What the heck? What is going? Oh my god! Microsoft PowerPoint is not responding. Let me restart. Well, give me a sec here. Oh. Shoot this over here. Okay, nice. PowerPoint is back up. All right. Is that good? Yeah. Okay, here we go. Section 3, making music interactive. Now, to make music interactive, we need something called middleware. And so I'll just explain what all of this is right now, all right? Really quick. As a composer, you create a song, right? But to make it interactive and bring it into the game, you need to first send it to a middleware, which goes into the game engine, which is where the game is developed. And this middleware will allow you to like put your loops together and do a lot of like fun stuff as the player is interacting with the game. You know, with the box analogy I mentioned earlier, you press a bunch of buttons. If you want the music to respond to that, that's what this middleware is for. Common middleware include things like Fmod or I don't know if I'm supposed to say Wwise or Wwise. But if you load up some of your favorite games, you might see some of their names in the title screen. So, just to brief on what middleware is used for, one thing is tails. Sounds a bit weird, but when you export a track, for example, this is that the water level track that I exported from Bosca Seoul. You'll notice that there's at this end section here, there's a part where like the music starts to go quiet, and that's because when you play a note, it doesn't like it goes on for a bit, right? It goes on for a bit after you let go. And that's what creates this tail. When you finish the track, there's a bit of a section where the note will continue to linger on even after you finish. And what happens is when you loop that, you'll hear that section where like it kind of goes down a bit, or there's a bit of a jump when you go from that back to the start of the track. And so one thing you have to do is to take that, put it back at the start, and like smudge it together. And that's one consideration you have to do. You have to think about when making music for games, but it's really just a minor thing. Another thing that middleware can help you do is it helps with creating transitions in your tracks. And so let's say you have two parts, right? Track A, track B. As you move in from the water zone to the ice zone, track A is for the water zone, track B is for the ice zone. You want the music to transition cleanly, and middleware will allow you to put in a bit of a crossfade or something so that it feels nice to the player. And middleware also makes it good because you can stop track A abruptly and it will adjust the crossfade accordingly, push it in a little bit more or whatnot, and still transition cleanly into track B. It can also help with SFX, so the sound effects. Sound effects help with, it can also be used as a transition between tracks. So, let's say like there's a bit of dialogue happening, and then SFX you throw in a sound effect as like you switch to boss music or something. That's one thing it can be used for. It can also go the other way. Instead of where like you listen to something from the music, and then from that signal the program to run some function. And so you can have a track here, you can look at track E, and say over here there's a crazy beat drop, right? Using some middleware, you can tie that crazy beat drop into some function that say like it summons the boss, or like the boss goes into the next phase. And so this is all stuff that middleware takes care of, and whatnot. Another thing that middleware can do is called layering. And there's two ways to layer tracks. You can layer it horizontally, where you move, let's say from like, let's say you have one track. Let's say you have like two doors, right? And one door on the right, one door on the left. You have like the current music playing right now. But if you go to the door on the right, there'll be, let's say, track C playing. But if you go to the left, there'll be track D, right? And you want to transition between that, that music playing during the decision and the music from either route. And horizontal layering is when you have that, you have track A, and you switch to either track A.1 or track A.2, showing like the decision you've made and making the music respond to the decision you've made. Vertical layering, on the other hand, is when you have like a big stack of instruments, you have something that's very dynamic, and based on what you do in the game, it'll slowly remove some layers or add a few new layers. So let's say we start with like a single melody. We can, then like something happens in a game, it adds in the chords and the drums. Something happens, you add in the bass and another melody, but then the chords are gone. Something happens, and then things change. Something happens, and then things change. And I have an example of this in Ableton I can pull up, where it can be used to like create intensity walking down a long hallway as the fights get more intense. And it can also be used for some more creative stuff, where in Super Mario Galaxy, the track completely shifts if you're above ground or underwater. And when you're underwater, a lot of the instruments will change. There'll be a lot more reverb and whatnot to really make you feel like you're underwater. I am not that much of a genius yet, so I don't have a game of mine that I can pull up with that feature. But I do have this track in Ableton. If it loads, give me a sec. Okay, I have this track. Let me change the output first. I have this track in Ableton where there's a few instruments, and I've labeled them in different stages. So we can start with stage 1. And something that you play around with a lot as well is the tempo. So I can start with maybe a 90. And we've got a few chords going down. Maybe we're walking down a hallway, exploring a new area. And then something happens or whatnot. There's some dialogue happening, and things speed up a bit, and we get another stage. Another layer is introduced to the music. Okay, for some reason, this speaker cuts off from time to time, but and then maybe things get a little faster. Another layer gets added. Maybe like like there's a plot twist, maybe like there's a text message, like something is spawning, something's going down, and then it goes, that's not and then it goes full throttle, and the boss is summon or something, and it adds another layer to it all. and then suddenly maybe there's like a middle phase, the drums stop for a bit, it goes slower for a bit. But vertical layering is, you know, adding these extra elements, removing these elements, changing the speed and whatnot, pretty much altering the current track without moving to something new to adjust to whatever the player is doing. And can I and yeah, that is very much just the bare basics of interactive, like of creating interactive music and whatnot. But those are the fundamentals, and there's so much more if you delve deeper into it. But that is all I'll be covering in the workshop today. Thank you so much for coming. I have the QR code to a feedback form. Does anyone have any questions or anything that was a bit confusing? What to do if my music sucks? It doesn't have to be. Yeah, if you're just starting out, you know, it's never gonna be perfect. I hate half the stuff I make, but it's about just doing a bunch, practicing a bunch, and slowly you learn a bit more and a bit more and a bit more. I don't know everything I know now from the start. I just made a bunch of tracks and slowly learned it along the way, you know. So you just gotta just, you know, vibe, have fun, and don't stress too much about it. Yeah. Is that anything else? Is everyone good? All right. Thank you so much for coming. I appreciate if you could scan the QR code for the feedback form. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. All right. I didn't check in chat. All right. I'm gonna end the live stream now. Good night, chat.